Hey everyone, you found another episode of Exploring Kodawari. Kodawari is a Japanese concept word that means pursuing an ideal, attending to the details along the way, but knowing that you can't arrive. And our guest for this episode has a really interesting hobby. Well, I don't know whether to call it a hobby or what, but it really fits in perfectly with the ethos of Kodawari. His name is Joe Labriola, and he's a good friend of ours who teaches writing at Stony Brook University. And his hobby is beach cleaning, which is exactly what it sounds like. Joe spends many hours at a time walking up and down the local beaches to pick up trash. As you can imagine, beaches are filled with various types of garbage, some of it ugly to look at, some of it disrupts the wildlife, and some of it is made up of the type of plastic that degrades into microplastics, which is a huge problem in terms of ocean pollution. So we get into the specifics of why he beach cleans, what types of garbage he tends to find, and how it helps the environment. And more spiritually or personally, we tried to dig under the surface to figure out what motivates people to help out in this way, especially considering that it's a very Sisyphus-like struggle because no matter how much you clean, there's always more garbage. Anyways, it was an interesting and philosophical conversation. Don't forget to check out the episode notes for links to various things we discuss, including his TEDx talk on this very topic. And also check out our website where we have articles and other content, including a page where you can support the podcast. See ya. All right, Professor Joseph Labriola, welcome to Exploring Kodawari.
That's how you say it. I've been wondering.
Yeah, I heard you type me the word of our podcast a few times, and you were like,
yeah,
I don't know what you said.
I've said a lot of things, everything but the actual podcast name.
So do you know what Kodawari is, by the way?
Yeah, great guy.
General Kodawari.
Yeah. Make some great chicken.
I only asked that because it's exactly your ethos of beach cleaning.
So what is the definition?
It means you're pursuing a goal somewhere on the horizon, like a carrot on a stick, some kind of perfection. For you, it might be cleaning all the beaches or something. You know you're not going to make it. You know.
Yeah, I was going to say the carrot on the stick metaphor is always a bit elusive and ominous in some ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's still walk towards it. So you clean the beaches.
Sisyphus.
Yeah. We'll talk about Sisyphus.
Great guy.
We're gonna get there.
General Sisyphus.
Camus, wonderful.
I heard General Sisyphus and Kodawari had great times.
I heard Sisyphus rocks.
By the way, if you hear
Pun
folks,
intended, I guess.
if you hear some ice cube clinking, we're drinking an old fashioned with Elijah Craig. I was about to say Elijah Wood.
Both great guys as well.
All right, so Elijah Wood, General Kodawari, and General Sisyphus walk into a bar.
They get wasted.
Can you just introduce yourself before we get into the beach cleaning thing specifically?
Sure. So I am Joseph Labriola, professor of writing and rhetoric. I've been doing a lot of beach cleaning the past several years.
How many years?
I probably started really getting into it maybe, I don't know, probably about 4 years ago or so now. I was always, and it's funny, it keeps coming up for some reason, because I guess it's how I started originally collecting beach glass. That was sort of the thing that I like just going to the beach because it's very
fun.
It's fun, but it's also peaceful, and it's kind
all
of
different colors, right?
Yeah, you get to explore. It's a little bit treasure hunting. And of course, over time, you start to and I've actually had this experience talking to a lot of other beach glass hunters on social media where they begin as beach glass hunters and they realize over time there's no avoiding the fact that there's far more plastic pollution and much more insidious and harmful types of ocean waste than beautiful beach glass. And so that's actually been interesting to see a lot of people, especially on places like Instagram, who start out with profiles dedicated to beach glass and beach glass hunting. They're just shifting by pure necessity into more
trash cleanup.
Yeah, cleanup.
I didn't even know beach glass hunting was like a category of thing on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why. In the sense that I think it's a hobby. It's almost a hobbyist thing.
Do people collect these and just take out and look at them?
It's probably similar to
Yeah.
the guys.
Okay.
Yanka, you've seen these people on the beach with the metal
Oh, the
detectors,
metal
and they're
detectors.
Yeah.
That's a
you're probably not making that much money. You find a ring once in a
No,
while,
yeah. Yeah, I
It's a
think
hobby.
it's very much a hobbyist thing for many people, and again, the more people I talk to who, because there's a lot of overlap, because like I said, I started that way where I was finding beach class and I was, I would post about it too. But over time, I just realized there's so much more plastic waste. And then when you start researching it yourself, and I also have the benefit teaching at a research institution to have many students who
you can send your little students off on figuring out research or whatever.
Well, they do the research themselves because they're not just science, or they're not just studying science, but a lot of them are marine sciences and environmental study and sustainability people. So I'm just...
So you're teaching them writing because they have to take a writing course, even though their major is whatever else?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, it depends on the course, but for
so
the
beach cleaning doesn't pay the bills? It's the right teaching writing?
Beach cleaning does not pay the bills, which is funny because I think some people think that. I've had that experience more than once.
They think the town must have hired you or something.
Yep, people...
or you're getting punished because you committed
social
a crime.
work or something, yeah.
Which maybe spiritually speaking, but
sure.
I've actually had that experience more than once where somebody comes up to me and they say, "Oh, this is great volunteer work that you're doing." And I remember this one guy, I said, "Oh, I'm not volunteering." And he said, "Oh, that's fantastic. So who pays you for that?"
No.
And I said, "Oh, I'm not."
What you
not
meant
paid for
was
it.
I am volunteering in a sense, but like not for a thing. Like volunteering implies like there's at least some social organization involved that
Yeah, I don't know the exact definition, but I agree with that sort of the unspoken contract of the term of the definition of volunteering, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the guy was...
Some people volunteer just for the social points is my point.
Yes, exactly. And the guy went back to then asking, "Oh, so you are a volunteer?" And I said, "No." And he just kind of stared at me and then said, "Oh." And then just turned and walked away. He was just so baffled as to what is in this for me as a weird guy just
who
cleaning
versus
up trash. Yeah, how are you winning?
Yeah.
I think was his question.
Yeah.
And that sort of gets to...
maybe he didn't trust you anymore. He's like, you must be crazy if you're just out here doing this, not with anybody, not for anything.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, you are doing it for something, but...
Yeah.
So pollution is a problem generally. Obviously, cars.
Tell us more, philosopher.
Like burning coal, fossil fuels, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What's the particular problem with ocean and plastics?
So ocean plastic pollution is interesting in that it very much is sort of an extension within the sphere of all those other issues that you say, right? So the big one that you have probably heard about for many years now in regards to real environmental catastrophe and environmental problems, obviously has been global warming, right? Mm-hmm. And fossil fuel emissions.
Or oil spills,
Oil spills, yeah. And that makes sense. And excuse me, that speaks to sort of, I think, the issue with why it's taken so long for people to get on board with dealing with ocean plastic pollution, because those issues, when they're very tangible and they're very visible, they elicit more of a reaction, I think. And oil spills is a good example.
You see the animals.
Yeah, you can see the animals that are being harmed by the same stuff that is also warming the planet. So that's sort of, I think, just inherently mentally more closely connected in people's minds. Whereas ocean plastic pollution, really, and I mean, I was the same way. I mean, I knew of it as, oh yeah, that's bad, but I didn't really understand the degree to which it was contributing to environmental catastrophe until a few years ago when I started cleaning.
It's a few
myself
layers downstream. No pun intended.
Well, yeah,
like
that's true.
In other words, the bird covered in oil that can't fly is just right there in front of your eyes.
Yeah. So that's another perfect example that I like to talk about, where if we think about the nexus of individual and larger societal change, and it's something I try to highlight in either the videos I make or the social media images and all that sort of stuff I post, that there's so many examples that I find of, and the one big example that you can point to is a few years ago that started the outcry against straws, plastic straws, was the video. Did you guys see the video of the turtle with the straw in its nose and the people trying to pull the straw?
I think I did,
Yeah. And it's horrible. Like the turtle's screaming. It's terrifying. Oh my God. And that essentially kickstarted the whole campaign to get rid of straws. Yeah. So it was a very tangible
You wouldn't think
example.
Turtles can scream, by the way, but they can.
Especially and it makes sense. It's like, yeah, if there was a plastic straw lodged in my brain, I would scream too, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, and I see examples of that in just beach cleaning in general, where I'll see probably a few months ago now, but this is a regular type occurrence where I saw a seagull and it couldn't fly because it had fishing line tangled around its ankles, and it was just kind of hopping around.
And those are made of plastic, right? The fishing lines? Or is it some kind of polymer or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, most of that stuff is, it's funny you say that because I found a sponge today. And I posted that on my Instagram, and I was thinking, oh, sponges are good. Like, sponges are made out of sponge. And then I Googled it, and a very quick Google search result returned that, of course, sponges should be made of sponge. But most sponges are made of some sort of...
Only the ones from Trader Joe's are made of sponge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Most of them are made of some sort of petroleum-based byproduct or whatever, right? So yeah, most plastics, while they're not the same types of plastic, and you can see this as reflected by they all have those numbers on them. Like, you ever wonder what those little numbers mean?
Yeah.
It's different types of plastic with different grades of chemical. But
some of them are heat resistant. That's why you can put coffee in them.
And
or
that's
whatever,
why you can recycle some of them and not others in the same process. That's why recycling will sometimes say like, oh, you can recycle these numbers, but not those numbers. But usually, yeah. So like fishing line is made out of, whatever it's made out of in terms of a type of plastic that's maybe obviously more pliable in a certain way as per
Either way, it'll break down in the ocean at some point, right?
Eventually, that's the problem, is that it might take, this is part of the problem with ocean plastic pollution as well, is that, different plastics might degrade quicker than others. And when I say quicker than others, we're talking anywhere from like several years to several hundred years. And there's no clear consensus on even how long some of these will take, because they haven't been around long enough to really see in the actual environment.
When was
how long they would
plastics
take.
invented? Like the 30s?
Yeah,
Something like that?
they've been around. I think like the earliest sort of variants of plastic have been around since the early 20th century. When they started really playing around with,
And now they're
with it.
dope at it. You can do 3D printing with all sorts of plastics.
Oh, plastics are
amazing technology, but just don't throw them in the beach.
It's one of the greatest and worst things we've ever created.
Yeah.
We'll be able to replace it like in 50 years, like with something else. That's
we'll have to eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
I don't think it's sustainable.
Well, it's funny you say, in terms of plastic, like don't throw it on the beach or don't leave it on the beach, because that's something else that I really like to talk about in terms of how to address this as a more holistic issue, because, and this is part of the problem as well, it's not even clear how much plastic in the ocean starts at the beach.
Right.
And there's wildly
you were
different
saying
numbers.
this in your TED Talk.
In the TED Talk.
I'll link that in the episode notes. But you were saying that like there's the macroplastics, like you see a water bottle on the beach that some person either accidentally or lazily left there.
Yeah.
But then there's like the bottle that was a bottle a year ago and is now just like part of the beach.
Yeah. Or there's the bottle that started, actually I made a video about this a couple of weeks ago, where it started 150 feet uphill, a mile inland. Guess what? It's going to take a century for that to degrade. That's plenty of time to find its way to a storm drain, to get into the storm drain and wind up in the ocean. And that's why most of the plastic I find, or most of the trash I find, it's not water bottles. It's not, stuff that you would think would originate at the beach. It's toothbrushes, it's light bulbs, it's batteries, it's
garbage bags that break open.
Yes, raccoons tip over
run
garbage
off
cans.
water.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's a lot of stuff, and that's sort of a much more daunting question, because it's like, what do you do about that? And you really have to assess, well, what are we doing as a collective species? Because the sort of idea that, if people just stop polluting on the beach, the problem is solved, is to me sort of an emotional, psychological cop-out for many people. Because you see what I'm saying? Like, they're isolating, like, that's the problem, and if bad people just stop doing it, then the problem's solved. And
that sounds oddly familiar with our current day. It's like if you can put a face to a problem that you're passionate about, it's easier to get people to rally around it. But if you say it's a complex problem that would take 10 different industries changing their behaviors, like making toothbrushes out of a kind, let's say you invent a kind of plastic that doesn't degrade.
And this is what we're going to need ultimately.
Yeah. We're going to need a technological solution.
Yeah.
And or something with incentives, right? You'll have to incentivize companies to not use certain types of plastics, even though they're cheaper. And you can say, hey, at the end of the tax year, if you can prove that you use this type of plastic, we'll give you a tax cut or something like that.
Yeah.
I think you can't rely with these big environmental problems. You can't rely on people's good will. I mean, capitalism is great
Certainly
in a lot of ways and bad in
industry's
a lot of
goodwill.
ways.
Yeah.
And one of the ways it's bad is that a company that's making 1 billion toothbrushes a year is not going to do the more expensive version of that unless they're incentivized to do that.
And this is the utter problem with, I mean, I don't like to use terms fully that I don't understand because I'm not an economist, but the idea, sort of more broadly speaking, of pure capitalism, right? Where it's like, well, the market will decide that that's a bad thing. Well,
you mean like a libertarian type of,
Yeah, maybe, but with
once the earth is gone.
Disastrous consequences, because that's one of the long-term effects of ocean plastic pollution. People say, well, it eventually breaks down, whatever. Well, no, it becomes that product that it was essentially. It breaks down into, whatever blah it's made of, and now that's in the ocean. And
you cannot beach clean microplastics.
I can't beach clean
It.
microplastics.
It's just there.
I can't beach clean acidification of the ocean. By this runoff and these products breaking down and heating up in the sun. And I know that's a big part of the problem too, is that a lot of this, it just sort of turns back into the microscopic mush that it was, or whatever,
Right. The go back to the atoms from whence you came.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. It's like, well, what was it originally? It was oil. Where was the oil? Not in the oceans.
Yeah.
It was
just like an oil spill is bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Wasn't there this thing in like one of the oceans where it's just like garbage, like for miles and miles? Like I forgot the area. There's a name for it.
They call that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Yes.
Because
aren't they cleaning it so slowly, but it's still gonna take like 13 years or something?
They actually, there was a company that developed a I don't know what you would call it. It was like a trash collecting thing to go there.
Didn't a kid invent that? Like a really young kid?
I think I read that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of ideas going around of like creating, I guess you would call them trawlers or something to deal with that. And that's, it's funny because they, I forget the name of the company, but they tried their test version of it for the first time, I think last year. And they collected, I forget how many tons in one trip. And, I just remember thinking, wow, they got more in one trip than I have in 4 years. But then again, I'm just one weirdo on the beach.
And
yeah, but you're making a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
When you do it, just for people, they can check out your videos. We'll link your YouTube channel or
Professor Labs
channel.
Yeah.
You're literally just walking with garbage bags and filling them up and then hauling them. I guess, where do you bring them to your home? Like, where do you bring the garbage afterwards?
My garden, yeah. my garbage garden.
Do you roll around in the trash afterwards? Like, what's your, is this like a fetish thing?
He got me. He found me out. Well, so that's sort of one of the, and again, this gets into the absolutist thinking that I think is part of the problem, right? Where people, forget about the problem of people assume, well, what's the difference of if I do it or not, because one person is going to make a difference. That's a whole other problem. But the problem of even when you do it, whether or not what you're doing is actually changing anything is a problem too, because me taking garbage from the beach and putting in a bag and having that bag be transported to a landfill is not ideal either. Right? Because what happens in landfills? Well, it still degrades. It still poisons the groundwater around, right?
Yeah.
That still eventually maybe runs off into the ocean. That's slightly better,
It's
perhaps?
like cleaning one room of your house and making the mess in another room.
Yeah, saying we're going to make that room just the mess room, right? As opposed to all the other, which that is slightly better, but you still have a dark room in your house that you're not paying attention to, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, I think it's important to acknowledge that. And this is sort of what I talk about in the TED Talk and what we were referring to earlier. Me going to the beach and saying, oh, I'm a great person. Look at what I've done. I've cleaned the beach. I've solved the problem. No, not at all.
Is that the sign you hold up when you're cleaning the beach?
Well, here's the thing that I do keep in mind. I am helping those seagulls that I saw hopping around that can't fly, right? I am helping the sea turtles that, get straws lodged in their brains and, die. So I am helping my local environment and by extension, the wider environment. But you need to keep in mind that this isn't solving the problem still. There's still more broader advocacy you need to do, a la what we were talking about with, forcing companies or making companies.
Getting policy at the government level, making incentives.
Right.
Do you ever get angry at humanity as you're like cleaning up? I remember one time you told me you saw just like, it was as if a family or a group of friends came down to the beach, enjoyed a nice sunset with fast food, let's say Chick-fil-A or something. Chick-fil-A is better than let's say Burger King. Wait, what if they want to sponsor us?
Yeah.
Let's just say fast food of any kind.
Yeah. Let's say fast food of any kind.
Yeah. Anyways, you said like they literally just left all their garbage. Like they didn't even try to pick it up. It wasn't like, oh, the wind took one of their bags or something.
Yeah.
Don't you ever get mad at humans? Like,
yeah, I don't think so. Anger is a weird emotion in many ways. I mean, this is something we've talked a lot about. Because anger can be good. I think anger is only good in terms of helping you form further perspective, right? And that's sort of what I think about in those moments. Like, it's not bad to feel anger, so I might be angry at seeing that. But I think the problem is staying angry, right? You sort of want to reflect upon that emotion and channel it more so into, you know, what is that really all about? And so I usually wind up being more sort of disappointed and sort of more reflective as to, well, what more can I do to then spread this word and this message and help educate, you know, people, myself included, so that we can work away from those situations, right? Because what's the alternative? I could yell at them and tell them, "Hey, a-holes, that's illegal.
But
what are you doing?"
You can't even see them. You usually find the remnants, you know.
But I also,
if you see it in action, you should definitely.
I also,
something.
I have. That's my point, and that, you know, my reaction to that is initially anger for sure. But again, I mean, so much of that is perspective. I mean, I feel as well 100 years from now, people will look back at me and say, that guy, he could have rode his bike to work, and yet he just drove around in his exploding combustion engine car, poisoning the world. What a terrible person. How could he have possibly done that, right?
Right, but that's I hate the whole from the future judge people from the past, especially when it's for things like
I do too.
Driving a car. Yeah. It's like, what the fuck would you have done? You know?
Well, that's my point. Is each generation has their own version of that, right? Yeah. So that's sort of my point, where it's like I think you sort of have to you can't let some things like that. It's more disappointing when I see something like that. And to me, it's more along the lines of you can't let that disappointment, you have to rechannel that disappointment from despondency, which is obviously, a very real emotion and can very well happen, and sort of try to refocus that energy more towards, like, I guess, confirming that what you're doing is a good thing, right?
Right.
And what you're doing is all the more important. And that's why I think, education, not in the, sort of performative way, but like I genuinely, I don't care if tomorrow this issue is solved. Honest to God, if this issue is solved, the government passes all these laws, we take care of plastic pollution, great. I'll go back to being a normal loser. I'm 100% fine with that. And I think that's the point, right? Like, you have to be doing what you're doing for the right reasons. And that's the problem, is defining what the right reasons are. But to me, the right reasons are to get the actual result, which is preventing the entire ecological collapse, which is way more important than ego tripping, as far as I'm concerned.
So I just found the Marcus Aurelius quote when you were
great guy as well,
saying just about, like, you feel the anger towards the family or whoever left the fast food garbage. So he has this quote: "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil." So it's sort of like just make people ignorant. Like, Yanko, we were sitting at the beach the other day, and we're in quarantine, pandemic mode, right? The beach is gigantic, low tide, so much sand. And this group of people without masks just, like, almost walks on top of us and like, oh, there's people here, let's go.
Talking and stuff.
And she got, like, genuinely upset. And I was just like, of course they would do that. They're like that.
Yeah,
like,
I don't
think... The fast food people, like, are like that. I mean, if you...
Fast food people aren't like that.
No, I don't think it's the action. So if I see somebody leaving trash on the beach, that doesn't upset me as much as somebody not willing to learn why that's a bad thing.
Sure, that's even worse.
No, that's true.
Yeah, and so that's been my whole approach.
Can you not know that you shouldn't leave garbage on the beach, though? There's a garbage can 30 feet away.
You
really think there's people out there? I'm arguing against myself now.
No, it's a good question. I think that there are people who don't think about it, right?
I think it's more than just like whatever.
Yeah. And it's what difference does it make what I do? I have a tough life. I have a tough struggle. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to check if my children picked up all the toys.
Right.
I assume I don't even think twice about it.
Right.
Right.
The plastic shovels that the
Yeah.
kids use or
and
whatever.
so my point is that in my experience, maybe it's because I've been teaching for so long now, maybe there's times and places for it, but I find it very ineffective to sort of shame people into then.
It's so common in our culture right now to
don't
shame
think it
people
works.
for anything.
Yeah, I don't think
And
it works.
Look, whoever you're shaming might be a shameful person, or what they did was reprehensible.
I think it reinforces bad behaviors.
it doesn't solve problems, though.
Yeah. So my thing is, when I see that, I try. My whole approach is to bring people on board. But to bring them on board through just awareness and hope and empathy, as opposed to,
For example, let's say you
Horrible
actually
people.
saw it in real life.
Yeah.
Somebody left the trash, and then they're walking to their car, and you happen to be beach cleaning.
Yeah.
What's better, to go over and shame them and make them think, next time I'm going to leave the garbage on purpose?
Yeah.
Or do you just go over and pick up the garbage, put it in your trash, and make them quietly think, ah, shit, we forgot to do that?
So here's the thing, and this is what I love about beach cleaning, is that it's one of those things where you can do that and really set an example, and it set an example that plants a seed, right? And so much of progress that is worth doing does sort of sprout from these seeds, I feel like.
Seeds of action.
Yes. And people will see that. I've had that exact experience where people have left stuff, and I just, if I'm, even if I'm not cleaning, I'll pick it up. But usually, then I'm cleaning, and I see they notice me, that you can kind of tell they're thinking what's going on. And I've noticed, at least around here, I've run into so many people, especially in the past, it's weird since the pandemic started, many more people beach cleaning.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah, many more people. And people
I
wanting
wasn't
to
out
talk
there
about.
cleaning, so I wouldn't know.
That's my point. There's always hope. There's always time to change.
There's always more people to clean beaches.
Yeah. But I've definitely noticed more people just doing it on their own, which is the most encouraging. People I've run into who say, yeah, I just started they know, they've admitted to themselves that they know that there's a problem.
Well, and they want clean beaches.
That's the other thing.
And you realize, this was one of the things you said in the TED Talk, was sort of like, you might feel an energy, let me change the whole world. But it's like, how about just do something right around you and fix that?
Yeah.
Because you can do that.
Yes. And that it has a positive effect for, what kind of person doesn't appreciate a positive effect to somebody who's right next to them? And that's my example with the seagull who lives at the beach, who, you cleaning up the fishing line helps those seagulls. That's your neighborhood. That's your community. These animals are tied into your local
What would happen to the
environment.
ecosystem if seagulls were just gone? Probably bad things.
I'm
not
no
smart
idea.
enough to know
right.
that.
I'm not smart enough either, but it can't be good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know if one type of bacteria is not in an environment, it messes the whole ecosystem up. So seagulls are pretty big.
I assume so.
And
Yeah.
I like the sound they make at sunset when you're watching the beautiful colors and you hear
I also think I'm starting to lose my mind because I honestly do feel as if the animals know me. Because seriously, I've been going to some of these beaches. I go all over, but I have my local beaches that are kind of okay, I got a lot of stuff going on. I know that beach. I know where the trash is.
I know the birds there.
I know the birds
The
there.
birds.
And even the deer, they kind of, I see them run from other people, but when I come, they kind of chewing the grass and they just kind of look up and go, what's up?
They talk?
Well, with their eyes.
With their eyes.
believe
Okay.
you. I believe you.
I gotta believe
Why,
you.
and I realized this last year. I said, "Oh yeah, I've been coming to this beach now, cleaning for 4 years. They clearly know I'm up to."
But just with
something
their
good.
eye, because they can only look at you with one eye at a time.
Yeah, but they don't.
Deers can't. They
Right,
turn
that's
their
true,
head.
yeah.
And,
but they don't dart off. So I like to, as delusional as that is, and what are we other than sustained by our delusions mostly? I like to think that the animals are if deers could
Giving
give
you
a
the
thumbs
thumbs
up, a hoof up, yeah,
Whatever motivates you.
yeah.
You want to think that the deer is just going keep going, man.
Great job, buddy.
Yeah, great job, buddy.
Yeah,
Okay, question.
Yeah.
So you also have a book that you wrote on beach cleaning, right?
Yeah.
It's on Amazon.
yeah. The Beach Cleaner's
Yeah.
Guide to Getting Trash.
Okay, we'll link that on the episode
Yeah,
notes. But
it's a great book.
What is your what is your book about mostly?
Yeah, so it's actually just a very sort of modest attempt to really highlight the basics of if you want to get into beach cleaning, how do you start that? and sort of how to prepare and, what to consider based on the weather, the season, time of year, whatever. And there's actually, it's funny. It's something that I thought to do after several years of beach cleaning, just because so many people are asking me questions. And I realized I know a lot about this just by doing it. And it's funny when people talk to me, they assume that I teach it or something sometimes because they hear I'm a professor. And they
almost want to think you must have an incentive that isn't just the thing.
Yes, or that there's somebody taking care of this. This is the conspiracy mindset, right? That even conspiracy theorists...
Dude, coronavirus just swept across the nation. We've had
nothing.
the second highest day yesterday, and we're 3.5 months... Nobody's in charge.
Nobody's in charge. And it's the same thing with beach cleaning. So the beach cleaner's guide to getting trashed is just kind of a very accessible way, I feel like, because it's pretty concise in its point-by-point analysis. But there's a lot in terms of each of those, the amount of points. And it's been good. I know a lot of people, especially people who don't live near the beach, I've recommended the book to who like, and that's something that we were saying earlier is so important that I think it's more important to clean around you if you don't even live near a beach than it is
anywhere.
Yeah,
they end up at the beach.
Exactly, it ends up in rivers, streams. It runs all off into the ocean. So I tell people
it'll eventually get there, even from Kansas, probably. Right?
I know people.
Maybe not Kansas.
No, I know people. I know people who live in thousands of miles from the ocean. All right, maybe not thousands, but many hundreds of miles.
Name one.
No, I do actually know somebody who lives in Manitoba and cleans regularly.
Oh, we used to go there every summer.
Where's Manitoba?
Exactly. That's my point. Their shit's still winding up in the ocean.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not so much Manitoba, but a lot of other places, you think about Florida, it's a peninsula. It only goes so far inland. A lot of that stuff is ending up in creeks and canals and running off into the ocean. So I know a lot of cleaners in Florida too who clean around, even inland because they know that stuff's going to run off too. But that's such a lack of awareness. I mean, so many people don't realize that that's a thing. And it is. I mean, again, this is the problem of not knowing the numbers because we know that a lot of plastic ocean pollution comes from inland and comes from countries like China, especially from river runoff, but we don't really know exactly how much necessarily.
And then once it's in the ocean, it's everybody's problem.
It's everybody's problem, yeah.
So one of the themes of your TED Talk, which was what we said before, sort of leading by example, right?
Yeah.
Another one was this philosophical concept. I don't even know if you could call it that, but it's a concept called tragedy of the commons.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that, Janka?
No.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so it's, we sort of touched upon it, but especially in terms of beach cleaning, it's the idea that, well, if I do or don't do something, it's not enough to affect the whole, right? So the example with, any country not taking care of their own ocean plastic pollution problem, it's like, well, it would be expensive for us to put regulations and recycling programs to deal with this. Whereas if it's just in the ocean, we're not noticing the immediate harm and whatever. Why would we take that expense on at our own cost when nobody else is doing it too?
Yeah.
So the original example of tragedy of the commons is with the sheep, right?
It's with the common grazing.
Yeah, the common grazing land. Yeah, where you have like 10 sheep in a field and everybody shares it. But
let's say a village of 10 different families, and they each have 5 sheep.
They agree. They agree. Like each person gets to milk 1 sheep, and then somebody decides, well, if I milk 2 sheep, I'll be rich because everybody else is only milking 1. But now everybody thinks that, and then all of a sudden there's
the patch of grass is gone.
Right.
With the grazing example, it's like now the grass is gone and nobody can graze.
Yeah.
The classic example is with fishing. So if you overfish the ocean,
that happens all the time in Istanbul.
Nobody can fish.
Yeah, right.
I mean, are there regulations here about that? Like
Probably.
We definitely have it.
Oh, yeah,
someone's in charge.
Yeah.
No, I don't know and this is part of the problem too. So much of this is the issue of why there are so many issues. It's hard to know. It's hard to know about everything, right? And with regulations, a lot of them are local. There's like federal guidelines.
Same with hunting. There's all sorts of guidelines you have to know about. Yeah.
And a lot of, at least where we live on Long Island, they've been doing a lot more with fish conservation efforts. There was actually a really interesting example a few years back. Do you remember in the Shinnecock Canal, they had that fish die off a few years ago?
Oh, I remember I saw an article about that. Yeah.
Billions of fish or something.
Yeah, something disturbing. Not billions, but like a lot.
So I don't know enough about this, but one of the theories I heard was that it was actually because people immediately thought, oh my God, the environment is dying, right? But it turned out that it was a result of there were too many fish because of all the conservation efforts they were doing. And they got funneled into the canal and there wasn't enough oxygen for the fish.
So interesting.
It would literally be like us in a room without ventilation losing.
Yeah. That happened in the harbor, I think, a year or two ago, right here. Where do you remember all the dead fish were floating up?
I don't know if I do.
Yeah. I think that was a similar
Interesting.
thing. But that's hard to distinguish from, is it that or is it something like red tide or poison, which is also a problem. So there's so many potential factors that, it's hard to even distinguish sometimes.
So that the tragedy of the commons, the standard argument is like depleting a positive resource like fish or grass or whatever.
Yeah.
But for your beach cleaning, it's more like a different, it's like the negative tragedy of the commons.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you stop doing a negative behavior?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So it's just the inverse of the standard one.
Right.
And that's even harder, I think.
I think so too, because it's,
hey, stop
it's
driving
less
your
obvious.
car. It's like, how am I supposed to get to work? Everyone drives their car to work. That's what's expected.
Well, that's the thing though. Right? Like I technically could stop driving my car to work.
Technically.
I'm not going
Yeah,
to.
we all can technically. Yeah.
Well, the tragedy.
Especially living in where we're living, like it's just not reasonable. There's no like if you're living in Amsterdam or
I could ride my bike to work. It would take several
I mean
day.
The tragedy of the commons in this scenario would be like we each individually say, why the hell should I sacrifice this? For two reasons. One, because it's not my responsibility. I didn't design this society.
Right.
And two, because even if I do it, all those other lazy people are not going to do it. So therefore, my efforts would be futile.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy. It's that philosophical trap your mind falls into. It's like, why should I bother? Because it doesn't make a difference. And it's like, well, the problem is everybody's thinking that. You say this in your TED talk about voting. Everybody thinks, oh, what does my vote count?
Yeah, I tried to give
What's your argument against that?
Yeah, I tried to give that example where that's something that people are at least familiar with. But that's still highly debated because there's still plenty of people who say, yeah, I'm not going to vote.
Right.
But there's a difference between reasons why not to vote. Some people don't vote because again, they work too many jobs or they're just too busy and they don't realize that there's alternatives even like absentee voting or voting by mail or whatever. But I like to give
There we go, folks. Right on time.
At least that one was quick.
I don't even know if the microphones will pick that up, but the ferry is leaving port. It always plays that was a low C sharp, right?
Yes.
Bongo da dom. All right, go on.
What was I saying? Tragedy of the commons.
Negative tragedy of the commons, like, why should you vote?
Oh, right.
If you know your vote doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it translates to so many aspects of society. And yeah, beach trash is certainly, one of it. But it's also this idea that, well, somebody should be taking care of it, right? The government should be taking care of it. Well, the government and companies aren't going to do anything unless you make them, unless you really force them to.
It's easy to think of an entity like the government as a thing.
It's just people.
It's just made of people.
It's people and bureaucratic mechanisms.
That's one of the terrifying things about growing up is when you're a kid, you think, oh, there's this like thing that is adults and decision making, and they know the important things, even if you don't think they know everything, right? Like that's the classic example. Your dad's a superhero when you're a kid, and then you find out dads die. And you're like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Like maybe a friend
of
yours.
Dad? Am I going to die?
Right. Well, that's later.
Oh, that's just existential dread.
Yeah.
Which is also part of the problem. But
it just to know, like, and this coronavirus pandemic was certainly an example of this where you go, wait a second.
Yeah.
I just assumed like there were really smart institutions and bureaucracies in government that are like 3 months ahead of something like coronavirus, and it turns out we were 3 months behind.
It's still a lot of
no
people.
idea what we're doing.
We still don't really know what's going on.
It's a lot of people waiting for a paycheck and just wanting a sandwich.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Right?
Government fails because it's a lot of people waiting for a paycheck and they want a sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And I more power to them. I understand that.
I'm hungry too. I would love a sandwich.
I might have a sandwich after this.
Wouldn't mind a paycheck either.
Yeah, I'll take two paychecks and a sandwich, please. One thing that I am encouraged by is the fact that that there is a system and that we have seen this work. And the example that we've seen it work with was the plastic straw and plastic bag outlash over the past couple of years.
True.
Which in some ways was discouraging as well because the plastic straws, like I said, was sort of prompted by the sea turtle video. And that led to a movement where many big companies were forced to abandon plastic straws because customers put pressure on them via social media. That's fantastic. That's great. But the problem was that people then, kicked their heels up and said, yeah, we won. We saved the turtles.
Right.
Plastic straws make up less than half of 1% of plastic ocean pollution. It's probably even less than that. What?
Also, paper straws suck. No offense. That's a horrible solution.
They do
something else, please.
They do suck, but I mean, these are.
Do I really have to use a paper straw for half of 1%?
It's like,
if it's just 1%
I don't care
difference.
about the sea turtles that much.
When I get my cold brew at Starbucks once in a while, and the paper straw collapses in the opening of the lid, and now I'm a jackass in traffic trying to sip.
Here's the thing. Here's my argument for paper straws. Elon Musk launched a car into space.
That's true. On this Falcon Heavy,
on a reusable rocket. 3 reusable rockets tied together.
Which all 3 of them landed in sync.
Which was
backwards
amazing.
on their landing pad.
One of them blew up on the drone pad, but the other 2 landed in sync.
Oh yeah.
And he's had much more successful landings since then, right? He can do that. We can make a plastic straw that doesn't fall apart.
I mean, we can do a lot of
straw
things.
that doesn't fall apart.
It all comes down to...
I really want to believe, yeah.
No, we
It comes down to wanting it and then doing it. Yeah.
And incurring the expense, valuing that as that's worth doing. Like I always make the joke that if I was dictator, first thing I would do is I would ban private lawns and jet skis. Because private lawns there's so much fertilizer, which is so bad for the environment, and pesticides.
Yeah.
So much fresh water is wasted.
Just watering those like lawns. What's the point?
So much CO2 from landscape machinery. I think I remember reading that California, something like 40% of carbon emissions are from landscaping, and they were going to ban like diesel things and make it all electric or something like that. And I would ban jet skis as well, because I feel like if you took the energy and resources, and people aren't going to like this who are jet ski people, but if you took the time and resources and energy that went into jet skis, you could probably do something to fix the environment with that equity of resource.
But
right?
Of course, we live in a country where you value freedom. So you go, okay, we have to say we value freedom.
Freedom isn't free, though.
We know that we have to put exceptions to that freedom so that everybody can have access to it.
Yeah.
So there's a balancing act. I would say in your dictatorship where you've made jet skis illegal, I find that troubling.
Balance. Yeah, balance.
But there is a Ray Anderson, who's a jazz trombonist, teaches at the school we both went to, and the school that you teach at, Joe.
Yeah.
He has a great YouTube video. I'll link it. Let me just type his name. There we go. So there's no chance I would remember that. But he has a great YouTube video of a song or whatever it is. I don't know if he wrote it, but it's called Don't Mow Your Lawn. Have you ever seen that, Yanka?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, I'll show it to you after the podcast.
Okay.
He just gives this speech about like...
I've actually heard that.
I think maybe you were at my house when we played it or something.
Yes, I do remember that.
It's really trippy.
Yes, it's very trippy.
But it's the message there is something like what you just said. It's like, what are you doing? Like,
and this is what worries me.
Why are you caring so much about your lawn?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to some of these questions, but I do know that getting more people involved and getting more people interested in it is the only way to lead to a solution. That I know.
By leading by example. I think that's the important thing.
That's my ethos.
One of the quotes I found here that says this perfectly. If you have to choose, be the one who does things instead of the one who would seem to do things.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And because people respond to anyone who leads by example. So imagine if you were telling people the importance of cleaning the beach, but you never really went.
Right, yeah.
I'd be like, what?
I sometimes think that because there are social media accounts that I look at and I'm like, I don't know that you're really doing what you're saying you're doing in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, there are a lot of things about a lot of topics that I don't want to specify.
And I worry that people might think that about me, that it's because to some extent it is performative. It's like when I take a picture of trash on the beach, it's like, oh, let me make sure that the angle is clear. And that's just for aesthetic reasons. But then I'm already, because I'm a very paranoid person in terms of I don't really like... I've never really liked attention in the traditional sense that way, but I'm already thinking, oh, am I a sellout now?
Yeah,
right.
I'm trying so hard for this, like whatever.
But that's different than saying, oh, this will get 70 likes and 3 more follows. And, I don't really care about all that.
Yeah.
I mean, if people like it, they like it. If I can get one person
I think those
to say,
things are good in terms of, can your message be more effective?
yes.
Not
exactly.
so much like, oh, look at me.
But why do you want it to be effective? Is the question.
What's your ethos?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
what's
To
your
get back
reason?
to.
I mean, even the TED Talk video, I think it's up to almost 1,000 views because I'm great. And,
Worship me, Dictator Joe.
and but I've had several people tell me that they went out and they got, the gear to pick up trash or they're just picking up on their local beach now. And that alone, I'm so thrilled that the video was able to accomplish even that.
Yeah, I mean,
which is cool.
That's part of your mission, right? Even if one person would be affected by it, you go, okay, because the whole point is let's get into the Sisyphus part, which is, if you don't know the Sisyphus
Actually,
myth,
not such a great guy now that
the
I think about it,
Mythophus.
right?
The Mythophus.
So it's this Greek myth where basically, let's just skip all the details where he pissed off Zeus and various other gods.
Yeah.
And he
tripped up.
He tripped up in Greek mythology terms.
Yeah.
That's the academic way of saying it.
Yeah, I tell my class that all the time. That guy tripped up.
So he was punished punished with an eternity of pushing this boulder up a mountain, but before it would ever get to the top, the boulder would sort of escape from his grip and roll back down to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And the message is sort of like, not only do you have to do this meaningless, futile task, you never even accomplish it.
Yeah, the struggle is everlasting.
Yeah. And then from that, you can sort of derive different philosophical ideas. You can say, I mean, in one of them, I forget the philosopher who did this, but it was basically like, what if Sisyphus, every time he was at the top of a mountain, took a little rock and brought it back down and then pushed the boulder back up again. And by the end of 10,000 years, he would have flattened the entire mountain by taking one rock at a time.
And then Zeus says, I see what you're up to.
I see what you're up to, Ramon. Yeah.
Now you have to do it with no arms again.
Yeah. So the Sisyphus myth is great. I don't know if you've ever seen the Jocko Willink video, the Navy SEAL guy. I've shown that to you, Yanka, right?
I know of him.
So he's this. He has a podcast. I think it's called the Jocko Podcast.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's really intense. Listen at your own peril. He'll just go into dark things.
Interesting.
So he has a video. They sometimes take speeches that he did in the podcast and put music to it and whatnot. And it's about Sisyphus, and he's talking about the whole point of it, which is that instead of focusing on the destination, the outcome, which would be like getting the boulder to the top of the mountain, realize that the whole point of life is the pushing of the boulder.
Oh, I would agree with that.
And he said, if there was a day where I somehow managed to get the boulder to the top of this mountain and it stayed there, and he pauses, dramatic pause, he goes, I would push it back down myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel the beach cleaning just fits with this Sisyphus myth. It's like sometimes you must go back to the beach and realize it's more dirty than yesterday when you cleaned it.
Yeah. And that's 100%. That's so funny you say that.
And that's because I'm putting garbage on the beach.
Well, that's one of the things we joke about when we're at the beach and somebody says, oh, don't forget to pick up, a cup or something. I say, I'll get it tomorrow. And that's actually something I tell people because one of the experiences...
You're not joking when you say that?
Yes and no.
Depends on the specific cup.
Well, no, that's true. Yes and no, because it's the same sort of experience I've noticed with people who I've gotten into beach cleaning, where when they first start beach cleaning, they say, "Oh, this is great. We're doing something to help, whatever," and then they sort of have a crisis of the realization that
they get overwhelmed.
Oh my God, we're not going to be able to pick it all up.
That's true.
So when they first got into it, they were thinking, yes, we'll accomplish a goal.
They were thinking that sort of dichotomy of, if
we'll get the boulder to the top.
If we, get the boulder to the top. And then they realize, we're not going to clean this beach today. And I say, in fact, it's going to be just as dirty tomorrow.
Yeah. Also, you're never going to be
able to clean you're like a beach cleaning guru.
Yeah, essentially.
You're like, so I'm thinking of the Karate Kid scene where it's like, sweep the deck, and they're like, but it's dirt. It's like, yes.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
made of dirt.
Yes. But again, it comes back to, and that's why it's so important to emphasize that it's not futile, that it does, at least at a local level, make a difference. And it is on this path towards greater change. I think I mentioned I've been reading that book, A People's History of the United States.
Zen, I mean?
The Howard Zinn.
Yeah. Zen or?
Zinn.
Oh, yeah. Duh.
He's very Zen. Yeah. But it's fascinating to read all these accounts of talk about Sisyphean struggles throughout history. Read that book.
Isn't that what history's built on? It's
my God.
Human beings enduring through hopeless situations.
And people knowing that what they were going to do is hopeless. And there's so many examples in that book of people who you could pluck them out and say, let's make that person a martyr.
Right.
Like marketability wise, the sky's the limit with what that person went through. And yet they're a footnote in this guy's book.
Right.
But they still did it.
Yeah. And they probably, depending on who they were, had a ethos personally that said, I know even if my name doesn't get uttered ever again, I can die at peace knowing I struggled towards the good. This is
an ethos throughout history. The more I read, I think one thing that, environmental stuff is obviously what I'm into, but I read a lot of history for this reason, because the more history I read, the more examples I see of people with exactly this mindset where they know I'm probably not going to accomplish what I really want, but that I'm doing this for. We're so short-sighted today, where it's
so short-sighted.
How does this affect me?
I feel
now?
like we're short-sighted at the level of like week at a time, or a day at a time sometimes.
Yeah.
Whereas people back in history had like grand visions, even though they failed locally.
Yeah.
They were setting an example for future generations way down the line.
Susan B. Anthony is one of my favorite examples of that. I was reading the Ulysses S. Grant biography recently, and she actually met with Grant and said, once he was president going into his second term before the election, and she wanted, him to push for women's suffrage, for the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And he straight up told her that's not going to happen. Politically, it's suicide. Right. I can't do it. He said, I support it, and I'm going to, and he did appoint a lot of women as postmasters and other positions. So he did whatever he could do in that sense. But he straight up told her, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's not politically prudent. And she still went to jail voting for him. Mm-hmm. Because she knew that he was closer to that ultimate goal of women's suffrage, which didn't happen, I believe.
Well, let's say she just abandoned supporting him. Then it's like you're even further from your your goal.
Very good. Writing professor approves.
Have you ever read the Camus? He has like a series of essays on response to the Sisyphus.
No, I haven't read. Can you send me that?
Yeah, I'll just read you. I'll send you it. I'm going to link it in the episode for sure.
I would love to read that. Yeah.
I found a free PDF of it online. But here's the quote that I came away with about it's. I think it's from the beginning of the book. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Mm. So it's sort of like at the sort of like base level of your ethos, you have to say, yes, I know I can't accomplish goals ultimately. I'm still going to try and push the boulder up the mountain. And I'm going to find an inner peace with that. I'm going to be, happy.
Yeah.
Not all of the time. Sometimes you'll be like, this goddamn boulder is so...
But you shouldn't be happy all the time.
Yeah. No, of course not.
I wouldn't want to be happy all the time.
Happiness is oversold like that. It's like, the meaning in life is happiness. It's like, no, it's not.
No, it's like having a purpose and like something to do, like just having a goal. Like, even though, again, Kodawari, like, even though you can't achieve it fully.
I was going to say it, like, it fits 100% with the ethos of this podcast.
I would agree with that. Oh, boy. Oh, I thought you were going into the fridge for some beers.
No, I'm just turning the motor off so that it doesn't come across on the recording.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I love that. Kodawari, the word that sort of sparked our inspiration for the podcast is exactly this, too.
Yeah.
Sort of like... embedded in the meaning is you can't get there, but still do it. Because the opposite is just nihilism.
Well, I think it's important to define, too, what is you.
That's true.
Talk about modern society.
Go ahead.
Being egoistic, right?
Yeah, people are very...
self-centered.
What would you say? Egotistical, but not in the way we use it normally, where it's like...
No.
Like spiritualism and... materialism often get put on like a spectrum of like that's the duality. It's like spiritual is like you don't have a scientific grounding, and materialism is like you have no spiritual life, no inner, I think that's the wrong duality. It's more like spiritualism and ego. And if you're more spiritual, you realize I'm part of something bigger.
Right.
I'm doing my small part. Maybe it's even it could be meaningless, or the meaning is so little because it's not playing a big part.
Right.
Your beach cleaning is not cleaning most of the beaches on the planet.
Right.
But you realize that still you have the choice. Remember the quote we said? I think you brought it up recently on the beach again, but we said it like a couple years ago when we did a beach clean during the winter, and we recorded a little thing to go along with the video. It was the quote was, "Aim at heaven, start at home."
Right.
It's like you don't know what heaven is. You're just a human being.
Right.
But you kind of have an instinct towards which direction it is.
Well,
it's
hopefully.
not in the way of leaving fast food on the beach.
No, I think
my instinct says that's not it.
And that's that's sort
at
of
least
the problem.
You know that, right?
Well, but not everybody doesn't. Maybe they do know it, but they've put up blinders to it, right? And that's sort of the problem. But that's why I think, again, it comes back to leading by example. It comes back to, just spreading education, but not in a performative way, trying to bring people in a genuine way.
Yeah.
I think.
The shaming just never works. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it does work in certain circumstances, but for my purposes, I don't find it useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually found where I got that quote from, the aim at heaven, start at home.
Yeah.
So it was Jordan Peterson was on this Aubrey Marcus podcast. I don't know if you ever heard that. I think it's just called the Aubrey Marcus Show or something like that. And it was towards the end, and the concept was one of Jordan Peterson's rules. He's the psychologist who wrote a book of sort of like life rules, and one of them, the 12 rules, and they actually come from a set of 42 rules, and he just like distilled them down to 12.
Oh, so the other ones aren't that important.
Well, some of the other ones, I forget which one made the book or didn't, but some of the other ones was at least where Jesus.
I'm here.
So I can relax my grammar. You're here.
Don't even worry about it.
All right. I have less. Jesus.
I think you need another drink. That's what I think.
Yeah. One of the rules was make at least one thing better every single place you go. That fits your ethos, I would say.
Yeah.
Work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. I think, boom, like that, even if you don't know what it leads to, that hard work will tell you that it doesn't lead anywhere at some point. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. I think that fits the beach cleaning thing. Like, people just generally think, like you said earlier, someone else is taking care of it. Yeah. It's like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
Somebody empties the garbages. But when you don't put garbage in the garbage,
right,
nobody takes care of it.
Right.
When you have runoff, nobody takes care of that, right?
Right.
So the other one was set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And that, I think, obviously could be literally your house. Like, if your house is a mess, how could you possibly criticize other things in the world?
Yeah.
But part of your house is the beach that you live by, right?
Your neighborhood or your community.
And so you can expand out in these concentric circles of expanding.
I like that, yeah, because
diameters.
Why would I be pissed at the federal government for not doing more to pressure companies and industries if I'm willing to just walk on the beach and ignore trash that I see?
Yeah.
Because I worked 40 hours a week this week and, spent the weekend at Timmy's soccer practice and don't have time to bend down.
Yeah. It's
maybe you have a bad back, then I understand.
I mean, look, there's all sorts of specifics.
I have a bad back too, though.
But these kinds of rules, I think his book was so successful because he found a way to say cliche type rules, but with his own language. Like if you hear a cliche, it just kind of rings an empty bell. It's like,
well, that's only because they're misused.
They're uttered carelessly.
Yes. Yeah. Cliches actually have very strong moral foundations often.
They are true. That's why they're cliches.
Yes, they've just been hijacked by popular,
What's the cliche that comes to mind, the most overused cliche?
It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's actually no, that's pretty good. I like that. Yeah.
Well,
it is what it is.
It is literally.
It really is.
Yeah. See? You get it.
Like all of so much of Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius's meditations, the energy behind the paragraph that he wrote it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yet when you hear it, it is what it is, you go, okay, yeah, those aren't your words.
Yes.
You're mouthing someone else's words.
Well, it becomes a cop-out because I've heard people use that where they say, oh, it is what it is.
Just empty. Like, why did
Empty,
you just
yeah.
say that? Yeah. That's
Well,
true.
yeah.
But if you say it in a deeply spiritual way, you realize maybe I live in a deterministic universe and I can't control the outcomes of things, but I can control how I respond to those things. And maybe I can't even control that, but that is not in my control, so whatever.
That gets back to an important point that I think is worth emphasizing too, where most people who have come out to, because I organize beach cleans too, and most people who have gotten involved through those end up just becoming solo cleaners on their own, where they'll still come to events, but I see them, posting their own stuff now. And they say it's very meditative. They describe it to know that.
You even said that in your TED Talk. You were saying like, because we did a beach clean together, and then you were saying you should do it alone once because it's like much different.
Yeah.
You connect to the earth.
Yeah. Well, you feel as if you're doing something that, again, it's you can't say that it's easy to look at a fraction of good and say it's not really
not enough.
It doesn't add up to being measurable, right?
Yeah.
But it is. And that's, I've had people come out to beach cleans where they say, I don't understand. There's nothing to clean here. And
that's a very Long Island accent you have there.
I'm quoting verbatim.
Yeah.
And I say, well, we have to walk down the beach. You're just literally looking in your immediate vision.
Yes, right.
Right.
Maybe
And
not.
and that's what I tell people. If you look, you will, and walk far enough, you will find trash.
Yeah.
And in fact, people, they assume if you're not seeing bottles, they think that's just beach trash. But I say, you could spend all day on the beach and not find one bottle, but fill up an entire garbage bag full of microplastics if you're willing to take the time to do it.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I like the beach cleaning ethos is it cuts right to the core of what there's like a competition between stories happening in culture right now between like you either are completely an individualistic type life theory or you're collectivist, and as if it has to be one or the other.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But
Well, I
on
don't
the
think it is.
on the individualistic side, people think it means you're just selfish. Oh, why should I clean the beach, or why should I do this, or this is my property, why should I care about like that kind of thing. So what they called it when they were quoting this, aim at heaven, start at home, he said, it's not selfish individualism, it's enlightened individualism. It's compassionate individualism, knowing who you are so that you can see yourself in everyone else and like get the whole thing moving in a good direction.
Yeah.
You realize you are an individual. That's an important thing that the West figured out, right? You have individual rights. You're an individual. You can own things, all that stuff, but you're also part of a group. And good luck trying to survive without the group.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to survive
You're
without
intrinsically
oceans.
part of that group.
Yeah.
You can't separate yourself from that group, whether you want to or not.
And if you did want to, I would say you're foolish, because not only would it just be miserable, you probably would not survive more than a week, right?
And I think it would be miserable.
And
right?
probably it would be. Tom Hanks didn't look too happy in Castaway.
No, he was rough around the edges by the end of that.
Oh, man. So you ready for bonus questions to end us off here?
There are bonus questions?
Oh, yeah.
I do have a quote
Oh,
if we're wrapping up.
yeah.
So I heard this just the other day, and this is why I think you should still watch the show Trailer Park Boys, because I think you would love it. But there's an actor in Trailer Park Boys who died a few years ago. I won't spoil it, but he died in real life.
Oh, okay.
I'll just say John Dunsworth, great actor.
In the show,
No, in real life.
Oh, okay.
Great actor. And the last season that they did was right before he died, so they included a clip of him in the post credits. They like dedicated to him, and they included a clip. And in the clip, he says it's like 30 seconds, and at the end of the clip, he says, "When you're dead, but you're not so dead if you contribute something." And to me, when I heard that, I just said, "That's like the best version I've heard for like why this type of stuff is good to do, especially if you're sort of coming to terms with this, the ego, right? And sort of the version of self versus society. It's like your legacy is what you do now. And people are obsessed with legacy, whether they admit it or not. That's why so many people have children and raise families. Like
We're wired to care
Yes.
about our legacy, and we don't
Yes.
know why.
And
Or
we don't
for
know why.
us.
Yes.
Yeah, for us, like I think it works in a way that we like perform music and stuff. Like
Mhm.
you leave legacy, like you have
Oh.
recordings and stuff.
Well, so
don't
much of that
know.
motivation
People.
might be I want to leave a legacy of impressing people everywhere I go
Yeah.
and having wealth and all those things.
Mhm.
I think what you're getting at is you can leave a legacy of like, well, what was the quote I just read before? It said, make at least one thing better every single place you go.
Mhm.
It's like, that's a legacy.
Yeah.
And guess what? They're not going to write about that in history textbooks,
Mhm.
or maybe it'll be a footnote in the Zen, people's history,
Yeah.
but that's still better.
Yeah.
I don't know if God exists, and maybe when you die, Joe, like God will be like, "Hey, good job with the beach cleaning, man."
You're going to 10th in line.
Yeah.
You know? Like there are some people who did some actual.
Here's
cool
a
stuff.
fast pass for free.
Yeah. You get fast pass, but you're only number 8.
Yeah. Some people cleaned up more trash than you. We're sorry to say,
yeah.
but still, we're impressed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, that gets rid of one of the speed questions, which was what do you think happens when you die?
I'm not worried
You're
about
raised
it.
in line. You
Not
know
worried
exactly.
about it at all. Because why would I worry about things that I can't control?
Which is
Great
everything.
point.
I
Maybe.
Not
Potentially.
everything, but a lot of things.
can control the beach right down there.
Sure. I mean, like it depends. That's a whole nother philosophical free will thing. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
I agree.
But there's certainly an element of difference between controlling how you die and controlling how much garbage is on the beach. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Or worrying about what happens when I do die. I'm more worried about how I live my life than the consequences
fair enough.
of once I'm dead. I assume my assumption is that probably like it was before,
Yeah.
which wasn't much. I don't remember much before.
I don't
was
remember
born.
anything from before I was
No,
born.
I remember some things.
Bullshit.
No, I do. It was just kind of like nothing.
Oh, God.
But that's my point. That's why I'm not worried about it. If there's something more, great. Sign me up. I'm down. But that's not going to dictate how I live my life.
All right, here's a speed one. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. I see us circling the edge. What belief has most changed for you over the last 10 years?
What belief?
Either something you believe that you no longer believe or vice versa.
I would say, in the general sense of how it ties to really why I beach clean, the idea that you have to, you can't leave things to someone else.
Mm.
If you want things to change, you really have to take the initiative yourself, and you have to be patient with that initiative, which is just everything we've been saying essentially. But it's absolutely
Don't wait.
Yeah, it's absolutely putting off something is never going to get it done.
Yeah.
I would say, and beach cleaning is obviously a very good example.
And that's
of
how
that.
movements start, not by telling other people what to do, but by showing them.
Yeah, maybe I would say more broadly than patience. Yeah, I would say patience, because when I was younger, like in college, I was very impatient, I think, philosophically.
Fast results. Like, I want it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are like that. And in some ways, I still am about some things, but I've gotten better at it. And I think that just comes with time. And I think that's something that I try to share as part of the whole beach cleaning.
It's like a
message, too.
confidence. You know, if you're aiming at something good, then, okay, I moved 1% in that direction. It's still better than the other direction.
Yeah.
Right?
You're not quite as dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is something that you are sure is true? Something like, if not 100%, the strongest belief that you have that you can't imagine changing your mind about.
Oh, absolutely. Hands down that I love watermelon. I always will. Always will. Watermelon.
Okay. I got nothing to say on that.
Do you like watermelon?
You know, it's okay.
Do you like watermelon?
Yeah, I love it. It's good.
So, funny story about that. My mom, you know how people have like crave foods when they're pregnant?
Mhm.
My mom's crave food was watermelon.
With you?
Yes.
Interesting.
And I have never not eaten watermelon when presented with it. No matter how full I've been, no matter how drunk I've been, no matter how tired I've been.
Have you ever had like a rum watermelon or like when
vodka watermelon,
Yeah.
rum watermelon? But there's this weird, there's something about watermelon that's almost, I don't know how to describe it. Spiritual, maybe. I'm upset. Like, because I love fruit because it's nature.
I wonder
candy.
if something
Grapes-
like epigenetically got into
Yes,
your embryo.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like 99% or I'm 90% human, 8% Neanderthal, and 2% watermelon.
Well, you probably are actually, because I know it's something like you're 45% identical DNA to a banana. So you're closer to a watermelon. If I were to cut a human in half, they would look more like a watermelon.
It'd be all seeds and rind, you know?
That's what I'm saying.
But there's something about eating, because I love red grapes too. Love red grapes. But there's something about biting into a juicy piece of watermelon that just, nothing else comes close. So that I will never change. Maybe I will, but I doubt it. That's my axiom, my one axiom that I will die on that watermelon hill about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I just Googled if what is the DNA comparison between humans and watermelons.
Yeah.
And I got nothing.
I will say whatever that percentage is, mine's at least 1% more than yours.
I think we share about 50% DNA with a banana, though. That's what I remember reading somewhere.
Quite impressive.
All right, one last question. Let's see what we got here. What can you remember about the time you laughed the hardest?
The time I laughed the hardest. You know what's funny? When you immediately said that, I thought of the time that you laughed the hardest.
Oh, God. Can you remind me of that?
Yeah. It was, I think we had been hanging out for a while, but we were in an attic. And,
oh, yeah.
And there was
this circa like 2010?
Yeah. And there was a certain episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia involving a musical.
Yeah.
And
you gotta pay the troll toll if you want to get into that boy's hole.
And I remember we died laughing, but you in particular, you just broke. I watched you break.
A circuit in my brain broke.
Yeah, you just couldn't handle Danny DeVito dressed up as a troll talking.
I didn't expect
That's
it.
an amazing episode, though.
Yeah, and we saw it when
I broke when I first
we saw it when we aired, and we died. But
there's no replacing the first time you hear it either.
No.
You know?
It's magical.
You can't get past that.
Yeah,
like,
it's a moment.
Now it's still funny for me to watch,
funny,
but my brain broke for sure there.
So
I think I was moaning. I was like,
yeah. So to me, I mean, I was laughing hysterically at it as well, but the fact that I got to see you break like that made it all the more humorous.
Yeah.
Gosh.
That was 10 years ago.
Oh, God.
Oh, man.
Can we go back?
All right. Well, you're on Twitter, right?
I'm on Twitter at Joe T Labs.
We'll link whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just copy and
Instagram.
paste your stuff. So check the episode notes.
YouTube.
I'll link his YouTube video, the TEDx talk that he did. You got a podcast I'll link.
Professor Labs as well. Most of it is Professor Labs.
I'll link your book on Amazon.
Great book.
And then I'll link some of the other things we did, talked about, like the tragedy of the commons. There's an article, the guy who invented that term. I'll link the Camus thing about Sisyphus. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's a heck of a commute to get here, but
Joe lives downstairs, by the way.
I'm willing to do it. It sounds like I'm a troll in the basement. It's it's a house.
You really sound
it's an
like
apartment.
that, yeah.
Folks, he cleans beaches and doesn't get paid. Of course, he lives in a troll hole.
You know what we could do? There's still sunlight.
You want to go clean the beach? At the very least, we could drink some beer and watch the sunset.
I'm going to bring my bags if that's okay with you.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks for listening, everyone, and catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Give us the bye. Bye.
Oh, bye.
Yeah,
there you go.
What is that?
Vanessa Gecko.
All right, thanks for listening to this episode of Exploring Kodawari. If you enjoyed it, we hope you'll consider sharing it on social media and with friends. You can also help us out by leaving a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those help us more than you would think. And if you'd like to help us out in a more substantial way, consider going over to our website to make a donation through PayPal. Links are in the episode notes for this. You can do this as a one-time donation or a recurring monthly donation. All of that support will help us to set aside time in order to create content for the podcast and the blog. And finally, please get in touch with us and say hi, either on social media or privately through email. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.